This is a true story. I don't claim that it happened to me, of course, but it did happen to someone. I heard it when I was younger, maybe about your age, if my memory serves me right. I only mention this because when I first heard Jack tell the story, I was so convinced that he was lying that I could hardly enjoy it. The whole time I was listening for proof that Jack was fibbing, so I could catch him in a lie. In fact, I was so convinced that the whole thing was made up that when he finished, I insisted he produce some sort of proof of his tale. As I stood there with my arms crossed, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a single gold coin and tossed it on the table. And to this day, I have never doubted one of his stories since. It seemed to me that Jack, by virtue of his name, had a right to all sorts of magical adventures, since a good number of Jacks find their way into fairy tales. I'm not sure how likely our friend Molly, or Moll as we all called her, was to have an adventure, but I could see a Molly having at least one or two, given that she was tagging along with a Jack. But I was out of luck, for as far as I knew, no one named Francis has ever gone on a single magical adventure. Jack's latest adventure began when he was visiting his grandmother in Edinburgh for the summer, and was due to saving an old woman from nearly falling down a deep, dark well. This woman, as is often the case according to Jack, turned out to be a witch. In exchange for his bravery, she had offered to grant him a wish, but as she spoke, he noticed a wicked smile began to curl the edges of her lips, so he thought better of taking up her offer. It's most likely one of those wishes that she turns back around on a chap and he's worse off than when he started. No, thank you, thought Jack. In fact, this was exactly the sort of wish that the witch had intended to give to Jack. She was also the persistent sort, and spent the next few days trying to persuade Jack to make a wish, or lurking about within earshot, hoping he'd accidentally let a wish slip out that she could grant. She was out of luck, for wishes come from things you want but don't have, and Jack didn't dwell much on those sorts of things. He was more likely to speak about what he was grateful for already having. Eventually, Jack sussed what she was up to, and made a very concerted effort not to utter any sort of wish while she was about. The obvious exception being that he wished multiple times for the witch to just go away. But if you know anything about wishes, you know that doesn't work. It's against the rules, you see, so nothing happens. It's like wishing for more wishes. On the day Jack's father arrived to pick him up from his grandmother's house, no one was happier than Jack at the idea of going home, for he figured his witch was more of the local type of witch, and since he was leaving town he wouldn't ever have to see her again. However, what he soon found out is that, unfortunately, all witches are very keen on travelling. There are a plethora of reasons for this, but mostly it is because witches have absolutely no social life. They're often a real bore to talk to, even for adults. With their constant scheming and cackling, they are hardly invited back to someone's house for a second visit. Now, before you ask why witches don't just spend time with other witches, I can tell you right now that there is nothing a witch hates more than other witches. After all, no one finds a fault more annoying than someone who shares it. Of course, they'd never say this to each other's faces. From what I hear, their get-togethers are all cackles and cauldron-stirring, but deep down inside they all can't stand one another. The other reason that witches tend to travel is that there are many more magic doors, brooms and carpets out there than people realize. So a few days after returning home, who was to show up in Jack's neighborhood but the witch? On one stormy night, Jack was nearly scared to bar me when he looked out his bedroom window to see the witch's soggy face pressed up against the glass during a flash of lightning. Ignoring her obviously was not working, so the next day he decided to face the issue head-on. Jack had his chance when he saw the witch sitting on a bench across the street from his house, pretending to feed the pigeons. "Look here," he said, walking towards her with his fists clenched. "I think this nonsense has gone on long enough. No one's going to do you a good turn if this is how you treat them. I've got no need for you or any of your bent wishes." The witch opened her eyes very wide, as if surprised, and looked around to see if Jack was truly talking to her. "Why, I had no idea that you lived here. What an amazing coincidence," she began, as if she was perfectly innocent. "Ha!" Jack crossed his arms. "My darling boy, is that any way to speak to your very own fairy godmother?" said the witch very piteously. "And what little boy would not want a wish from a fairy godmother?" "This one," said Jack, who was not taken in for a second. Somehow the more she tried to trick him, the uglier she looked. And if I see you around here again, I'll call the police." "Very well, as you please," said the witch with a wicked smile. She sounded slyer and looked uglier than ever. "From now on you won't see me any more." But she said "see" in a way that anyone could tell she had no intention of leaving Jack alone. This was about the time when the mysterious magical gifts began appearing in Jack's room behind his closet door. For you see, almost every little girl or boy's bedroom has within it a magic door. Most of the time this door is in the closet, and it is how the monsters and other various boogies get into your room at night while you're sleeping. Some children have thought to tell their parents about said monsters, but most of the time it does no good to tattle, for parents are in cahoots with the monsters. Besides that, it's well known that it was monsters who invented things like bedtimes as a way to get kids out of the way, so they can go through your stuff while you're asleep, or eat some of your socks, which between you and me is one of their favourite snacks. Some people say that monsters also like to eat children, but I wouldn't concern myself with that, since they only like bad little children who stay up past their bedtime, so I doubt you have anything to worry about. It was through this closet door that the strange gifts came. First came the basket of enchanted apples. They looked so bright and delicious that most people would be hapless to resist taking at least one bite. But Jack took them out back and fed them to his neighbour's pigs. The next day, 12 strange little boys were found in the pig pen, and no one could get them to put on clothes or say where they had come from. I shudder to think what would have happened to Jack if he had eaten those apples. Then came a spinning wheel with a very sharp needle, and a note that said, "I spin straw into gold." But Jack put a cork on the needle and then broke it off. He then gave the wheel to his mother, but she never ended up using it, since she already had an automatic sewing machine. After a while the gifts became fewer and fewer, and Jack began to hope that the witch had finally given up. But one rainy fall evening, when Jack was in his room with his cat, the closet door flew open, and behind it was an ugly green ogre. He stood so tall that you could only see up to his mouth in the doorframe. He wore a coat made of wool that was completely soaked through. He also wore wool pants and heavy work boots. If he wasn't soaking wet, I'd imagine he would have been quite hot. The ogre then bowed his head to get through the door and stepped into Jack's room. For a moment the ogre just stood there, furrowing his brow and looking back and forth between Jack and the cat. It was obvious that he intended to do something to one of them, but for the life of him he couldn't figure out which one it was. "Well now, dare," he began in a heavy Dorset accent, "which one of you is Jack? I was sent by a witch to kidnap ye and bring ye back to her. Now, I don't want no trouble, so just up into my sack here and we'll be off." Jack, thinking quickly, pointed at the cat across the room. In 2 steps the ogre was on the cat, and the moment after that the cat was in the bag. The ogre then turned and headed back to the closet. Right before he ducked down to leave the room, he turned back and gave a tip of his hat to Jack. "Thank you kindly, friend. This hooligan won't be causing you any more trouble." Jack suspected that if he was in the sack, the ogre would be saying the same thing to the cat. Now, mind you, this trick only worked because the ogre was an ogre, and everybody knows ogres have a hard time telling apart anyone who is not an ogre, especially if that anyone is smaller than them. They're also not very smart, and tend to believe people when they say or do something very quickly. Eventually, though, they become suspicious if you trick them too often. I wager that if you tried this sort of trick on a giant or a cyclops, things would not go as well for you. An hour and a half later, the closet door opened again. "Now lurk here, I don't care much for your shenanigans. If I say in their sack, then in their sack you go. Got it?" bellowed the ogre at Jack. "Sorry, you have the wrong house," responded Jack. "There is no Jack here." "Oh, my, well, I'm terribly sorry, sir. Please accept my sincerest apologies," stammered the ogre. "Don't mention it," replied Jack, and the ogre was gone again. Another half an hour, and Jack's closet door flew open so hard that it nearly came off the hinges. "Well, I guess you think you're awfully smart, don't you? Well, I just realised I ne'er said I was looking for a jack last time, and you said there's no jack here. So just shut your mouth. I'm not going to let you trick me again. The witch told me I bought all your tricks, and I figured I'd starch you up before you could trick me otherwise," said the ogre in a huff, and in a moment he was on Jack, and had scooped him up into the bag. After what seemed like a rather long time of walking outside, there was finally the sound of a front door opening and a change in light. All of a sudden, Jack was dumped out on the witch's floor next to his cat. "Here you go, ma'am," said the ogre. "One Jack delivered as promanced," and then he went stomping away. "Hang it all! I should have known you were behind this," groaned Jack the moment he saw the witch. "Why, Jack," said the witch, "so nice of you to stop by. It has been far too long, my darling." "Stop by!" exclaimed Jack. "I was thrown into a sack and dragged here by an ogre." "By gum! You really are the worst, the absolute worst," said Jack in a fluster. "All of your rubbish gifts, and now this." "Oh, yes, well, about that," began the witch in a voice that Jack had never heard from her before. It was strange. It actually sounded humble. "I've decided to turn over a new leaf. I've decided to become good." And on the word good, the witch let out a shudder so strong that it shook her whole body. "Well, jolly good start you're off to with this kidnapping," said Jack, still sitting on the ground with his arms crossed. "Well, you can hardly expect me to become good on my own," hissed the witch, and shot him an angry look. "Hardly." Jack shot her an angrier look back. "Come now, my boy, that is a poor attitude to have towards your host," said a sing-song voice from the other room. This was the first time that it occurred to Jack that he might not have been alone with the witch. Out of the kitchen stepped a tall, thin man. He was sharply dressed in a tailed jacket and a tall black top hat. Under his jacket he had an emerald waistcoat, and the inside of his black coat was bright red. Jack could tell in an instant from his clothes that he was a magician. As he spoke, he sounded very intelligent and noble, but seemed a bit too flashy. And though he sounded persuasive, most clever people knew magicians were not to be trusted. He produced a wooden stool for Jack to sit upon as he made his way into the room. "You see, my boy," began the magician, "in order to get what it is we want, we need to go on a magical quest, and that's why we need you." "Me? What do I have to do with your magical quest?" asked Jack. "Well, your name is Jack, isn't it?" asked the magician. "It is," said Jack, sitting on the stool. "But what does that have to do with the price of tea in China?" "Well, it's a commonly known fact that a boy named Jack is at least 60% more likely to complete a magic quest than an average boy of the same age. We are trying to be scientific about this after all," said the magician. "Scientific about a magic quest? Ha!" said Jack incredulously. "Why don't you just go yourselves and leave me out of it?" "Myself? Look at the statistics, my dear boy. Have you ever heard of a wicked witch or a crooked magician completing a magic quest in a fairy tale?" asked the magician, who had gone into a fright at the very notion. "No, actually," said Jack, after thinking about it for a moment. "That's because none ever have," said the magician, raising his eyebrows. "They always do someone a wrong turn, and getting their comeuppance long before they can finish. For us it would be near suicide. I still don't see what your quest has to do with me, even if my name is Jack." "Well, I just figured since you were the only Jack I knew, and you're such a nice boy," began the witch. "You figured I'd help you out of the goodness of my heart. I hope that wasn't your plan, because if it was, you can just forget about it right now," said Jack, turning his back to them both. "I'm doing no such thing." "By all means, then, there is the door. Leave if you want," said the magician with a clever grin. "But have you stopped to consider you don't actually know where you are?" Why, of all the low-down, dirty, rotten tricks," grumbled Jack as he realized the jam he was in. "Ah, now you see the rub," said the magician, still grinning. "I trust I now have your full attention. Our proposition is simple. You get us the things we need, and we take you home, as easy as that." "I don't have much choice in the matter now, do I?" said Jack. "What is it that you need?" "We are preparing a powerful spell, one that the magician has heard of but never had the courage to perform," said the witch. "It is called the True Word Spell. You drink a potion and speak one word, then you become the word you speak."
Our problem is we needed a brave lad like yourself to assist us with gathering the ingredients," said the magician. "Fine, just tell me what you need. The sooner I start, the sooner I'll be done with it," brooded Jack. "Well, that's the spirit. We need the gold of a giant, the tear of a dragon, and the heart of an imp," said the magician. "The heart of an imp," said Jack, disgusted. "Cripes, seems like rather hard luck for the imp." "Have you ever met an imp before?" asked the magician. "No." "I doubt you'll feel the same way after you do," said the magician. "Anyway, I plan on saying debonair as my word. I will be invited to all of the fanciest parties and charm all the wealthiest widows." "My word will be good," said the witch. "And if you want to know why, you can mind your own business." "All right, now that that's cleared up, why don't you get started?" began the magician, lifting Jack to his feet. "I've drawn a little map for you. All you have to do is follow it and you'll be right as rain. Best of luck to you and all that rot. Try not to get killed by the dragon or anything else for that matter. And as soon as you're back, we'll send you home." Jack stepped out the door of the small cottage and saw that they were on the edge of a vast forest near a mountain. "Right," said Jack to himself. "First on the list is a giant's gold. The map says that the giant lives in the castle down the path after it forks right."
So Jack walked until he came to a castle, which was much bigger than any he had ever seen. Unfortunately, Jack had no plan to get the gold once he got there. He decided he might try the direct approach and yelled up to the gate. "Hello, are you giants up there?" said Jack. "Aye, we are," replied a giant in a thick Scottish accent. "Do you have any gold?" asked Jack to the giant. "Aye, we have a wee bit," responded the giant. "Are you in need of any gold?" "Well, I do not mind taking gold from you, if you had gold to give," said Jack. "We do have gold, but I don't think this gold is for you," said the giant. "Well, how can you tell if the gold is for me or not?" asked Jack. "I suppose you could start by telling me who you are," said the giant. "I'm a boy," said Jack. "In that case, I can give you some gold if you help me make some bread," said the giant. Just then, a big black crow flew down and landed right in front of Jack. "What is the delay?" asked the crow in the witch's voice. "Did you turn yourself into a crow?" asked Jack, surprised. "Did you ask him what the delay is?" said the crow in the magician's voice. Then it said in the witch's voice again, "Would you wait a moment? We're getting to that." "Oh, I see. It's like a telephone. Can you hear me all right? Or do I need to speak into the beak or something?" said Jack. "The giants just invited me into their castle to make bread." "Whatever you do, don't go in. They grind boys' bones to make their bread," said the witch. "No fear, then. I'll just stay out here, thank you very much," said Jack. "My dear boy," began the magician's voice from the crow, "I should hope that you aren't of the ilk that loses their nerve at the first sign of danger. It's a most unbecoming trait. A fine thing for you to say after sending a boy out on a quest you wouldn't dare to go on yourself," said Jack. "That had nothing to do with bravery. We've discussed this. It's statistics." "Statistics or not, all I know is that I'm out here about to be turned into bread, and you're back at the witch's cottage, safe and sound," said Jack. "Oh, I know. Tell them your name is Jack," interrupted the witch. "Giants have been terrified of anyone named Jack ever since that one Jack climbed up here on a beanstalk and killed a whole slew of giants." Just then, over the wall came the head of the enormous giant, who was speaking with him. It was actually a giantess, but since giants' voices are so low, Jack had no idea until her head peeked over. "Oh, wee poppet, are you still out here?" said the giantess, licking her lips. "Come now, there isn't anything to fear, Poppet. Come right in." And then she dropped the drawbridge in front of Jack. My name is Jack," said Jack. When the giantess heard this, she let out a giantess shriek, but she was so large she sounded like a foghorn. She then drew back up the drawbridge twice as fast as it had come down. "I dunno want nary trouble," said the giantess, quaking. "Here, take all our gold. Just leave in peace, you little hellion." And then threw 2 very large sacks of gold at Jack, one of which almost landed on him, crushing him. "Finally, a bit of luck for a change," thought Jack. "I wonder if getting the other items will be this easy." Jack filled his pockets until they sagged and began walking towards the next spot on the map. It was a cave, or a hole. Jack really couldn't tell which, since the magician was not a very good artist. Finally, Jack arrived at the spot on the map. It was indeed a cave. The area around it was all craggy, but the hole itself was closed up by a rather smooth, round wooden door. On the door was a knocker in the shape of a dragon. Jack reached out and gave the knocker a few good raps. "What was that? The door." "Oh yes, quite right. I mean, hello," came a voice from inside the door, with the sound of someone very large and clumsy fumbling its way through a rather full cave. "Greetings. You wouldn't happen to be a young maiden that I could, devour?" asked the dragon sheepishly. "Or a knight who intends to sneak into my cave and snort, murder me in my sleep?" "If I was," said Jack, "would I have knocked on the front door?" "Quite right. That was just a test. Devour and you. Passed. Yes, passed. So, not a maiden or a knight. Right. Then go away. Said the dragon. "Wait," said Jack. "I need your help." "Help, No, my boy, I know your mind. Yes, you would, sneak in and, rob me of what is mine," said the dragon. "I don't want to rob you. My pockets are already full of gold," said Jack. What, gold, you say? Pockets full of it? Yes, quite right. Well, that's a different story, Let's have a look," said the dragon. Then a small peephole swung open on the larger door, and Jack could see the dragon's enormous eye. Jack pulled the coins out of his pocket and held them up for the dragon to get a good look at them. Well, yes, everything seems accounted for. Can never be too careful, you see. Please come in," said the dragon, opening the larger door. "What brings you to these parts? Come in, I say, don't stand there. You'll catch your death of cold." Death. That's right, just step right in. Remember, you need to get a tear from him," said the crow in the witch's voice. "How exactly am I supposed to do that? I wouldn't have the slightest idea how to make a normal dragon cry, let alone this one, who's obviously off his nut," said Jack. Off my nut, you say? Oh, yes, I heard you. Well, I may have stared unblinkingly into the abyss of, madness. But as it stands, I am not the one conversing with a bird, am I? Yes, there it is." "He has a point," said the crow. "Oh, button it! You're not helping," whispered Jack, frustrated. "Just tell me how to make a dragon cry." The dragon led Jack back into his hole, where the walls glistened all around him, for they were adorned with jewels and shiny things like the nest of a bird. Deep within the hole there was a small open area with an ordinary wooden table and chairs next to a fireplace. The table had been set up for tea. Yes, some tea. Good for your health, they say. Nothing more important than staying healthy to ensure long life, said the dragon. Drink, my boy. Yes. Would you hurry up? Whispered Jack to the crow. I'm fairly sure that this chap is trying to work up the nerve to eat me. I'm trying, said the crow, but this spellbook doesn't make sense. It says that you need to make a tear to get a tear. If I had a tear, I wouldn't need to make another, said Jack impatiently. I know, interjected the magician. Maybe if he sees you crying, he might start crying too. That's the worst idea I've ever heard, whispered Jack. Why would anyone cry just because someone else is crying? If you have any other ideas, I am all ears. Besides, the sooner you get the tear, the sooner you can leave without being eaten, said the magician. Yes, the secret to tea is to pick the youngest shoots. They are, of course, you see, the most, tender and smack delicious. You look rather, tender yourself. And at that, Jack made the saddest face you could ever think a boy could make, and his eyes grew large and wet, and looked the size of saucers. Good heavens, lad, are you quite all right? You, seem distressed. Come now, you mustn't become agitated. It ruins the flavour, yes, of the meat, said the dragon. Then something occurred to Jack that neither the witch nor the magician had thought of. There are tears that you cry, and there are clothes that tear. Then he looked at the dragon and saw that his scales were hanging off of him loosely. They rattled around when he moved like a mail shirt. Then Jack thought, if I grabbed one of those scales and pulled as hard as I could, I might be able to tear it loose. Looks like our tea time has come to hem an end. Ha, mumbled the dragon. Oh my, it seems I have forgotten, snort the dainties, for our dessert. It shouldn't be much more than a moment now. Yes, there's a friend. I know I put them somewhere. Yes, here." Then the dragon brought forth a tray with tea cakes and biscuits on it. "Here, try one. Yes, you see they're quite, sumptuous, yes?" continued the dragon. "Ha, of course they are. Oh, I've just had the idea for a marvellous game. It'll be quite the lark. Yes, excellent. You close your eyes and, well, yes, I will give you a treat, and you must do the same for me, you see. Yes, it will be great. Fun. Yes, ha. And with that the dragon snatched up a biscuit and shoved it in Jack's mouth. Yes, now it is my turn. Go on, ahem. I'll open my jaws wide, and you can, place the treat on my tongue. Go on, climb in there. Don't be shy. Yes."
"Now you're sure your eyes are closed?" asked Jack, trying to sound innocent. "Remember, no peeking." "Ha! Rumph! I wouldn't dream of it now for the treat. Yes," said the dragon eagerly with his eyes closed. Jack looked around and found an old iron cook-pot near the stove. In that moment a number of things all happened at once. Jack yelled, "Here I go!" as he tossed the pot into the dragon's mouth. Feeling something on his tongue, the dragon chomped down upon it, breaking all his teeth. Last, Jack pulled down on the dragon scale with all his might and tore it clean out. The dragon let out a howl of pain, and out of his eye fell a single tear, which Jack caught in the teapot. Without waiting another second, Jack was up and running towards the door with the dragon hot on his heels. Jack dove out the front door with the dragon snapping at his feet. Then something happened that the dragon did not expect. The dragon had grown quite a bit since he moved into his cave. So when he chased Jack, he became hopelessly wedged in the cave's doorway, and that is right where Jack left him. "Bravo," said the crow in the magician's voice. "We have but one ingredient left, and so there is no time to rest. Just head to the forest on my map." As Jack followed the path to what looked like a blob of trees on the map, the forest grew taller and taller, and the way grew darker and darker. Then the branches of the trees grew downward to block his way, so he pushed forward into complete darkness. Suddenly he felt a sharp pain on his ankle, and another on his hand, and another on his nose. For some reason he seemed to hurt all over. But just at the darkest point of the forest, Jack saw what looked like a small light through the trees. He passed through branch and bough. Jack pushed and ducked until at last he came out on the other side of the wood. He fell into an open glen, but when he looked down to see why his hand hurt, he saw a purplish creature with bat wings and long gangly limbs biting it. He jumped up and saw more of them biting his ankles, his back, his elbows, and even his nose. Jack pulled one of them off and held it in front of himself to ask it a few questions. "Ow, stop that!" said Jack, shaking the creature. "What's wrong with you? Why are you biting me?" The creature shrugged as if it didn't quite know itself. It was as if it bit Jack just because the opportunity presented itself, and it was the most natural thing it could think of doing. "Well, don't you have anything to say for yourself? After all, don't you know it's rude to just go around biting people for no reason?" Jack stood there demanding an answer, but the creature seemed perplexed. Then, all of a sudden, an idea washed over the creature's mind, and he seemed to have something very important to say to Jack. The creature beckoned him closer and cupped its hands over its mouth so he could tell Jack a secret. Jack brought his ear very close, and suddenly he felt a sharp pain on his ear. "Ow!" exclaimed Jack again. "Why would you do that?" Just then the crow flew up and said, "Good! I see you found my imps."
"Thanks for the warning," said Jack. "Why are they biting me in the first place?" "They're imps," responded the crow in the magician's voice. "They get endless enjoyment from causing slight discomfort and annoyance to others, and they'll most likely die before they give up the opportunity." "Well, how am I supposed to get them back to the cottage?" asked Jack. "You can just walk back how you are. I sincerely doubt that those little buggers have any intention of letting go," said the crow. As soon as Jack started walking back, the sky grew grey and it began to rain. By the time Jack reached the cottage, he was a muddy, imp-covered and soggy mess. Not to mention he was chilled to the bone. "Excellent, excellent, my boy," declared the magician, as he and the witch came around him, both wringing their hands greedily.
Jack felt the pair were looking uglier by the moment. Once they had pried the imps from Jack, his two kidnappers engrossed themselves with flasks and spells and bubbling cauldrons, leaving Jack soaking wet and cold. He took off his shirt, and after wringing the water out of it, he hung it to dry. He watched the two as he warmed himself near the fire. After quite a while of concocting, the magician finally announced, "Eureka! I've done it!" and held up a cup full of a bubbling black brew. This right here is the very thing, the spell, the formula, the true word," said the magician. "Now all I have to do is to drink my cup, say my word, and become the embodiment of debonair." But as the magician threw back his cup to take a drink, he knocked over the cauldron, spilling the rest of the brew on himself and the floor. "Bother!" declared the magician. "This sludge has gotten on my waistcoat, but never mind that. Debonair." "What have you done, you selfish fool?" shrieked the witch.
"Oh, yes, all that. You'll just have to send the boy out again to fetch you some more ingredients, I suppose," said the magician dismissively, but then added, "Ho, ho! It seems like something is at work already. I feel it bubbling up inside me." Now at this point something very surprising happened to the magician that took aback both Jack and the witch. For you see, the very first word out of the magician's mouth after he drank the potion was not debonair, but bother. So he was turning into a little worthless bother. He grew smaller and smaller, until he was the size of a hen, and his nose and ears grew larger, like a rat's. His arms and legs grew feeble and weak, and all his hair just fell out. Also, when he tried to speak, all he could say was "Scrunch," which left him with no hope of ever changing back. For if you thought a bother was a horrible thing to be turned into, that's nothing compared to being transformed into a scrunch. Another thing happened after that, which Jack didn't expect. The witch sat down upon the floor and began to weep. There, I'm sure it's for the best," said Jack, feigning concern. "Now, how about pointing out the way back home?" "For the best? What do you know?" sobbed the witch. "I wasn't always a witch, you know. When I was your age, I was a princess."
What happened?" said Jack rudely. "Well, aren't you kind?"
said the witch, irritated. "I was jealous of my younger sister, so I decided to learn a curse to turn her ugly, except it backfired, and turned me ugly instead."
"That sort of thing seems to happen a bit more than one would care for when using magic, doesn't it?" said Jack. "Anyway, this spell, this true word, was my only hope of getting back to who I once was," said the witch. "What am I supposed to do now that my last hope is gone?" "Look here," said Jack decisively. "Now, I'm not one to buy into all this magic business, and I probably wouldn't believe in fairy worlds existing if I wasn't currently in one. But I can believe in God even when everything else seems hopeless. If you truly want to change, forget all this magic business and ask him for help."
"Oh, I couldn't ask him," said the witch. "He wouldn't help someone as far gone as me anyway."
"But that's just it. All you need to do is ask him," said Jack, "for he specializes in making those too far gone good again. It's his expertise."
"You really think I could?" asked the witch humbly. "Could he? Would he really help me?"
And then, for the very first time, the witch somehow looked less ugly than before. "Of course he would," said Jack, and began to share of all the stories he knew from church, where God helped people that were even nastier than the witch, if they were sincere in their request. For he was exactly the sort of boy to share that kind of thing with someone in need. So, after she had made sure that Jack's clothes were dry, and he had some hot cocoa, the witch, if it was even fair to call her that any more, showed him the way home. She told Jack that she would seek out her sister to apologize and ask her forgiveness, and the more she spoke, the grander her stature became, so that when she parted ways with Jack she no longer looked as an old witch, but instead a proud, regal queen.
"Oh, wonderful," said Moll. "I love happy endings."
"Tommy rot," I declared. "Who would believe such nonsense? I don't suppose you have any proof that this really happened, do you?" Jack, being utterly astonished that I didn't believe him, thought for a moment, and then began to pat down his pockets. He finally found what he was looking for in his left front pocket, and then, with a grin, he pulled it out and tossed it on the table. "Will this do?" he asked. A large coin of solid gold rattled around, and then finally came to a rest in front of me.